It's 4:20 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabist Show. I'm producer Vince, and here's your host, Ricardo Baca.
Thank you, producer Vince. Oh man, to everybody joining us today, welcome to the Cannabist Show, where we talk about all things weed.
All things.
That is the serious marijuana news and the fun stuff as well. In fact, if you pop onto the site right now, that is thecannabist.co, you can read stories about the election. So many stories about the most important cannabis election we've ever known.
9 states are voting this year.
So many. About the opening of the first cannabis testing lab in Alaska.
Former guest Charlotte Green's probably pumped.
And about how the great state of Oregon has already sold more than $160 million of cannabis in 2016.
And it's only, what, October right now?
Producer Vince, how you doing, man?
I'm well, Ricardo. Thank you for asking. I'm fresh off the plane from San Diego, where we told everybody we were going to be last week. The show didn't seem to happen because we got caught up in something much, much cooler that our viewers, readers, and listeners are going to be able to check out soon. How have you been, Ricardo?
Oh, seriously, dude. Yeah. Apologies for taking that unintentional week off. We really did have a plan to produce a show last week, and we have some interviews to make up because of that plan, and we'll figure it out. We'll get it out to you guys. But I'm doing good. I've been in California 3 times in the last 3 weeks. That's kind of lunacy, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But
not even Californians.
Oh man, well I do love California. Just all those airplanes, and you know, I just missed a lot here in the office. It was a long time to be gone. But I do have to throw out every trip I made. You know, 2 trips to Northern California, 1 trip to the South with Vince. It was such a special experience meeting so many of you guys who watch this show. You know, to the people who pulled me aside at the New West Summit and said they don't miss a show every week. To the young couple, we hung out at the Meadow Party. God, that was a lot of fun out back next to the Dab station. You know, that was just a very, very cool experience to get to California. To recognize that our little show is reaching you guys out there in mass. So please tell your friends about what we're doing here. I think they'd be interested too. And thank you for saying hello. Thank you for tuning in. Vince, I think it's time to jump into the Week in Weed.
Can we talk a little bit about Colorado in this Week of Weed? I kind of missed this state, brother, but let's do it. Let's get into it.
You wish we could. In fact, I don't think there's any Colorado news in this Week in Weed, although we have some later on. Right. But we are going to start this Week in Weed in Arizona.
It's close.
Where the latest big donation against the state's pot legalization campaign comes from a familiar figure.
A very familiar figure, Ricardo, to both the cannabis industry, the casino industry, and even what we do right here at the Denver Post. Actual daily newspaper journalism.
Indeed, Vince. Of course, his name is Sheldon Adelson. He is the billionaire casino magnate who just donated $500,000 to the campaign against legal cannabis in Arizona. Adelson's opposition isn't anything new. If you've been following along, which I know many of you have, you know that Adelson has already spent $2 million opposing recreational pot in Nevada this year. He lives there. He spent another $1 million to oppose recreational pot in Massachusetts this year.
And in 2014, years ago, Adelson gave $5 million to oppose a medical marijuana amendment in Florida, which ultimately failed.
You know, Adelson made political news this week when the Las Vegas Review-Journal became the first major American newspaper to endorse Donald Trump for president.
And what does that have to do with Sheldon Adelson? The Review-Journal underwent a secretive sale in late 2015 to new owners who wished to remain anonymous. But after initially denying his purchase, Adelson later revealed that he had indeed bought the paper in an ultra-secretive $140 million deal.
Yikes. So next up in the Week in Weed, moving right along, we're going to keep talking about weed campaign financing as we hop over the border to California, where we have a much clearer picture of who is funding the pro and the anti campaigns for the state's historic legalization initiative, and that is Proposition 64.
Ricardo and I just mentioned that we had, just got back from a week down in California talking to locals there about Prop 64, and here's a fun fact about the initiative. supporters of Prop 64 have raised 15 times more money than the measure's opponents.
And that is a lot of money, of course, but who's contributing the most? Some of the names are familiar and expected even, while others are quite surprising and completely unknown. On the pro-legalization side, you have some big names that have already been publicized, including Napster founder and Facebook influencer Sean Parker, and he's donated roughly half of the $19 million war chest for the pro campaign.
And some of the other big names donating money to pass Prop 64 are the George Soros-funded Drug Policy Action, the California-based weed mapping company, Weed Maps, and PAC, a PAC that is a legacy of Progressive Insurance founder Peter Lewis.
Now, opposing the measure, though, with donations is Project SAM, a group that fights legalization efforts throughout the U.S. Not all that surprising, but all of SAM's money being spent in California comes from one person. Her name is Julie Schauer, and she is a retired East Coast art professor who manages a family trust. She hasn't done any interviews that we could find, but she has said on social media that she believes marijuana can be linked to violence and mental illness.
Another quick fun fact. Schauer's donation to SAM to fight legalization in California makes up 82% of the opposition campaign's totals.
Now, lastly in the Week in Weed, here is cannabis policy and business writer Alicia Wallace with this week's Quick Hit.
From DC to Denmark, Puerto Rico to Portugal, Arkansas to Australia, some policymakers from around the globe have made their way to Denver, Colorado to get the skinny on what legalizing recreational cannabis actually entails. Marijuana regulators in Colorado are serving as mentors to cities, states, territories, and countries on how to write the rules for this rapidly expanding industry. Andrew Friedman, the state of Colorado's Director of Marijuana Coordination, knows the challenges in this. Agenda-driven reports have made some outsiders think that, according to Friedman, this is a paradise or hell right now. So the roles of Denver and Colorado leaders are to dispel myths, break down the needs for complex regulations and collaboration, and share both the positives and the pitfalls. Ashley Kilroy, Denver's Director of Marijuana Policy, told me this, quote, "The world is watching, and we in Denver are going to get it right." And as the world is visiting, officials from Puerto Rico, Denmark, and elsewhere told me that what they've seen in Colorado will play a prominent role in decisions made back home. I'm Alicia Wallace with this week's Quick Hit.
All right, thank you, Alicia. And now it is time to bring out our first guest. He is the Director of Government Affairs for an exciting cannabis tech startup out of Colorado, and it's my pleasure to welcome Jonathan Teeters to the Cannabist Show. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
How's it going, man?
Great, good to be here.
Welcome to the couch. Great
Thank
to
you.
finally have you out.
I like couches.
I know, we've been in contact for, I think more than a year, at least with your colleagues over there, and I'm thrilled to finally have one of you guys out here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure, and we understand that this is obviously a very widely watched opportunity for us to talk about what we do and also be part of your success as you expand across the country. So
Thrilled, man. Yeah, I think we're all expanding, and I'm excited to hear about yours as well. But Jonathan, we got to start with the brass tacks.
Sure.
Indica, sativa. Where are you at?
I'm a 100% sativa guy.
Oh, yeah.
Except for when I'm medicating all my football injuries, and then I generally lean towards a heavy indica.
Okay, and tell me what that looks like. What does your football injury involve, and then why does an indica treat that better than a sativa?
Sure. So I played up through my first full year of college at the University of Idaho, and to do that after 14 years of football, you end up with ankles that crack at every step you take, tendons that are torn or partially torn. I blew out both my shoulders before I quit playing.
Wow.
So all of this leads to long-term health consequences. It's not something that we're all hearing about football these days.
We are.
The impacts on players and what players are choosing to do to make sure that they're heard in the discussions about their lives and their health.
Mm-hmm.
And cannabis is a very important one. I actually work or know some of the folks down in San Diego who work with like the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition, for example, and they, along with thousands of us former football players, are trying to make sure that we recognize that cannabis, because we have an endocannabinoid system in our body, is meant to help us without all of the opioids and other man-made drugs that are pushed on us often as players and as just people with pain across the country. So.
Unbelievable. And the indica treats it in a different way than a sativa does?
I'm not a certified weed expert, so to speak.
Yeah, but from your own personal
from my own
experience.
personal experience, it does. It has a lot to do with the relaxing me. Makes all my joints generally relax. And some of my favorite strains tend to be hybrids on the indica side.
Cool. So. I'm curious, Eugene Monroe, the former Baltimore Raven, is writing for us now. He wrote, his last column was about how he will not let his son play football. That's a big decision. A big NFL player, recently retired. Yeah. But is it something that you can understand?
Absolutely. I've had the discussions with other football players. We spend a lot of time talking about how to make the game safer, how to recognize when the time is to stop. Fundamentally, I think there's a lot of better ways to be active and be part of a team if you're a young person until the game of football can evolve. In fact, we're here to talk about evolution of cannabis. I mean, we got a lot of growing up to do in the things that we take as sacred in this country, and football is one of them.
I agree. We do have a lot of growing up to do around both of those topics, marijuana and football, and I think that'll always be a conversation, at least for the next 5 years, at least until the NFL continues to evolve to a more sane place with this substance. But Jonathan, I want to start by tackling this because Tradiv is a cannabis company. You are the Director of Government Affairs. Yes. Tradiv, cannabis distribution and logistics company. But quickly, what does that mean?
Sure. So that's pretty much the question we get all the time. We used to try to sell Tradiv by talking about it being a technology platform that connects cultivators and retailers and manufacturers.
Sure.
What we found in general is that not everybody lives in Silicon Valley, so when we talk about tech platforms, it's great for fundraising, but not really great for really connecting with the folks who are doing business with us.
Exactly.
So usually now the way that we explain it is, well, Inc. Magazine did it best. They basically said that we were like the Amazon.com of cannabis for wholesale.
Sure.
So what that means is we don't deliver to patients, but we are an end-to-end supply chain solution for cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers. And what we've done is essentially create an online community like Amazon has, like Airbnb has, where we connect people with goods that they want to sell into a marketplace that used to not really exist. And we've created a marketplace online where buyers want to connect with people who have those products to sell. Etsy's very similar. Instead of making craft necklaces and jewelry, for example, or candles, we have people who are experts at making craft cannabis. And so we connect both small farmers and large enterprise companies with buyers and sellers. And then we do all of the delivery and pickup, and we handle the cash safely. So that's really where eyes light up when we talk about what we do.
Oh, sure. Okay. So if I own a cannabis shop and I need product, I can go onto the Tradiv platform and look at all the people who are selling and make a purchase, and then you guys will facilitate that cash transfer or the money transfer and deliver it.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, with our expansion into California, we actually now have trucks and warehouses that are doing this. And we're looking forward to 2017 in Colorado when a new law that was signed will allow us to actually do the same thing here.
Exactly,
so it's going to be a good time.
Couriers distribution kind of service, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that expansion into California. Is that your second market? Also, that's a very different market than what we have here, strictly regulated. They're still operating in the Wild West out west.
It is, and I'm more familiar with the Washington State market and the Pacific Northwest markets, and so people would tell me that Los Angeles is like the Wild West for dispensaries and for cultivators, or Humboldt County, and I'm now really starting to understand and appreciate what that means, and it's very true. And I think it's going to be there's going to be a loud pop when people wake up and realize what happens with legalization, in that it's a formalized step-by-step process to move us forward, but it has to happen. You're seeing how Colorado's adapting and really making the most of it. Other states are as well, and I think California, while different and while Wild West, also is the largest cannabis economy in the country, if not the world.
Probably the world, yeah.
And as we were just discussing a few minutes ago, California is actively learning from other states who are doing this well or have already learned some of these lessons. As a Director of Government Affairs, I work closely with a lot of the regulators, and I'm learning what they're learning. And actually, as a company that has relationships in the industry with cultivators and manufacturers and retailers, we're actually figuring out how to leverage that network so that we can help educate regulators faster, because there's a tight time frame that they have to get through based on the rule book. And our biggest concern is making sure that they come up with good regulations the first time, knowing full well that we're going to have to continually clean them up, much like, you know, Colorado has seen.
Understandable, yeah. And we saw the same thing in these last couple trips out west. I think there's a lot of people there who have an idea of what's coming, but I think there's more people out there who have no idea of what's about to come, given that every major poll signals that Proposition 64 will pass.
There were people out there who thought they were regulated when we were out there.
That's true. That's true. And some people thought they were regulated, and me and Vince were like, well, okay.
Yeah, and that's always been a little bit of the false dichotomy with California is when Prop 215 passed, that was their official medical marijuana legislation.
20 years ago next month.
20 years ago. And I think that made people feel like they had some legal structure around what they were doing. But the problem has always been enforcement.
Sure.
You know, and until you can really put the rules around this and let people run according to the same sets of rules, it is wild, wild west. And I think many of us in the industry are excited at the prospect of having at least a rule book for how you can go and be a successful business, a successful brand in California and in other states as well. I think that's one area where you can start to speak to equity is working on making sure the right people are writing the rules and that the rules are written the right way.
Sure. I want to switch gears because I know I want to talk about a subject that I know is very important to you. It's very important to me. It's no secret that the war on drugs disproportionately affected minorities, and many of these minorities are now shut out from working in this industry in certain parts of the country. So, especially with that element of so many of these folks can't get a job, whether it's in Colorado or another market. How did we end up here where they were the ones that paid the biggest price and now they can't benefit from the market?
Yeah, you know, in looking further into this and also being part of this industry as a person of color, dealing with a lot of the same implicit biases and assumptions, but also having an MBA and being from having a deep political background and being able to look at this from a structural perspective as well. I think that it's a mix of just structure drives behavior, right? So the structure that we put around something will implicitly determine what comes out of that structure. And we know now when we talk about law enforcement and police, you don't have to look too far on YouTube or on Facebook to see where the structure of our law enforcement community has a lot of implicit biases in it that are either put on people of color or are just baked in and we don't even know they're there. And I think that then spews over, or there's no separation really, on the war on drugs. The war on drugs was almost an excuse to use those implicit biases in an area where you had goals on how many people you had to arrest. Also, you know, we've seen a decrease in violent crime overall across this country over the last 20 years because we've focused on it. You know, meanwhile, you know, while we've taken our eye on, and murders are down and rapes are generally down and, you know, violent crimes are down, what we are seeing is that a lot of the law enforcement effort that has then gone to the things that they can find easily, which is the drug possession crimes and things. I also think that under legalization, there's a little bit of a Trojan horse there that when you legalize and say you have to be 21 plus, you then make it a crime for anyone 18 and under who is consuming or in possession. And there's new laws then about how they have to be handled, which again puts them into the criminal justice system one way or the other.
Sure, sure. But I guess now within this regulated or semi-regulated industry, depending on where we're talking about, you have different models. In Colorado, if you have a drug-related felony, that prevents you from getting a license to work in the industry. Meanwhile, in Northern California, I know you're familiar, we talked before the show, Oakland City Council is putting in measures that will guarantee that a certain percentage of owners in their district of marijuana businesses are specifically people of color, are specifically people who maybe were affected by the drug war, maybe did serve time or get arrested on small possession charges. So I don't know, is there a right model that you've seen so far that could be worked in such a way to incorporate these people who are affected the most?
Well, you know, there's 5 or 6 other states that are going to be voting on November 8th to legalize recreational, adult use cannabis, and so every one of them has an opportunity to learn lessons from those who come before. I don't know that there is a right way, but we're getting righter every time we take a crack at this. The Oakland model is a very interesting one. I think it has a lot of good pieces to it. One thing it's starting to reveal, I think, is that a focus on employment in these communities should really be an emphasis, not at the expense of ownership of these companies, because that is important too. Equity and a stake in the community and in businesses is important, but also employment. These communities that are often the ones who have been penalized or most hurt by the war on drugs are often the ones that have the highest rates of underemployment or unemployment, undereducation, and some of the worst schools. And so the fact that some of the benefits or the economic benefits from legalization can go to directly address those issues, I think that's something we have to keep an eye on and make sure that, like in Colorado now, there's plenty of, I won't say plenty, I don't live here, there's lots of money now going to schools and other things that the government has chosen not to fund, or that over time has just gotten too big for its britches or whatnot.
Sure.
So I mean, I'm optimistic that California can figure this out. The state regulators are also looking at ways that felonies and other convictions that may or may not be directly cannabis related will go through a review panel. And so that means real people will look at your application and look at the nature of your crimes, and they'll put a personal touch on it, hopefully. You know, that's the idea of, instead of being black and white, so to speak, for lack of a better pun, I guess, on this issue, where if you have a felony, you're out automatically. This says, you know, some might be different than others. Were there extenuating circumstances? You know, what were the causes of it? And actually, you know, in California, under adult use, is it no longer illegal? Or would it have not been illegal today were adult use, these laws that we're putting in place?
Exactly, retroactively applying.
Back then. I think that's a great conversation to be having at this time in our communities. And you've also seen the state of Oregon be a leader. I think that's a great way, where they just said, you know what, you're out of jail. Like, one of the things where you write in all of these pieces about you can reapply for, you can, you know, go back to court and try your case again. There's an expectation that you will have the resources, that you have the knowledge or the know-how to get there, or that you even know it's possible. And a lot of the most affected people by the war on drugs fall into those categories of not having the resources to hire a lawyer again, or to, you know, relitigate their case, or to even have somebody on the outside who cares enough about them to help them. And I think that that's one area where you can say there's going to be, you know, incredible benefits from this, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the people who really need it are the ones who are really receiving those benefits.
And I'd love to talk about moving this conversation forward, because, as you know, women have been actively collaborating, organizing to ensure that they own a piece of this industry. And early statistics at least suggest that it's working, that they own more marijuana businesses than they do in traditional industry. But in your opinion, you know, speaking directly to somebody of color out there listening or watching, what can they do in these, because we're still in the early days of legalization, what can they do? What's your advice to them?
So I would say a lot of the responsibility is on the industry here. It's easy to say that there's a lot every individual can do to find their way in the front door, in the side door, in the back door. And a lot of it in the cannabis industry is still that way. You have to know people, or you have to show up at the conferences, which also cost sometimes hundreds of dollars, to try to make a relationship that will lead to, you know, you can follow the breadcrumbs, if you will, back to an opportunity. I think, again, saying the responsibilities on the industry means that just like other industries who have seen a need to change what their employment pool looks like, or the direction of their industry, we have to be really focused on this. And that means that we have to do things like invest in pipelines. You know, we have to take ourselves seriously enough to say that we can start partnering with colleges and universities to do research, to create intern programs between some of our biggest companies and our biggest schools that have an opportunity to produce bright young people who are going to go into these jobs that are requiring MBAs and engineers and chemists and physicists maybe in the future. You know, who knows? But I think that until we show that level of commitment as an industry as a whole, we're still having people on panels talking about diversity, which is something we enjoy doing. We enjoy talking about these things, but really we have to focus on the levers we can pull to actually change what happens on the as an outcome.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of that is on the industry taking a serious look at itself. We're young enough now, we can make these decisions too. That's very encouraging.
So there's only so much that our listeners can be doing. I met a young couple in California, in San Francisco to be exact, and they said, we listened to your show. We are not in the industry, but we hope to be very soon. And so there's only so much they can do. But then a lot of this relies not only on the shoulders of the industry, but also on the regulators.
On the regulators and on the industry itself, because there has to be an opportunity, there has to be a place for people to go to have a job.
Sure.
Until we create them or articulate who should be in these jobs, it's going to be a lot of us who know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Now, I wouldn't say there's nothing people can do. Again, networking is one of the best ways you can do that to find opportunity. And there are a lot of low-cost ways that you can get to know folks in the industry, whether it's starting to follow popular or influential people on Instagram or on Facebook, starting to engage on LinkedIn. That's actually been where I found a lot of interesting people who are not in the cannabis industry, starting to figure out that by engaging professionals in the industry on a professional social networking site, they can start to be top of mind when these folks look for jobs or go to search for folks who are active. They then, they become relevant.
And that's a good point. There's a local lobbyist here in Colorado who works with a lot of different entities, some of which are in this industry. And next thing I knew, he was following me on Instagram and liking things and commenting. And he was clearly coming from an educated perspective, and he was aware. And then suddenly we're working together because he's representing some companies that are going through some problems, and we needed to talk to those companies, and we had that little level of familiarity, which is so minuscule when you think about it, but it's real, and that can create tangible relationships. So that's good advice. And we're not done talking about this. We're not only are we going to talk about it later on the show, but I hope you're back here next year after the election, and we're still talking about this. I think this is obviously an important conversation and an ongoing conversation, not in Colorado cannabis, but we're talking worldwide cannabis. This is a new industry. Why not treat it differently than we've treated so many of our other industries?
Absolutely. We have a chance to be intentional about these things. So often we wake up and we're told, here's your Wheaties, here's your soap, here's your car, here's your gas. Like, these things are set up for us just to kind of fit into.
Sure.
And I think that part of the spirit of the cannabis industry and of the entrepreneurs who are making it successful is that nobody's telling us, for the most part, what we can and can't do yet. We're creating it. And we're being active participants in the regulatory process that will eventually be the rules that people will wake up to.
Sure. Yeah. And I look forward to talking more about this with you just in a few minutes. Thanks for joining us on the couch, man.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Now, I want to throw to our very own teacher of tinctures. Of course, that's Professor Pat for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Tincture. A liquid extraction of cannabis, often made with alcohol or glycerin, using methods that date back thousands of years. Tinctures are often administered sublingually, or under the tongue, to help with quick absorption, offering a similar high to edibles without having to swallow food for those with little appetite. To that in a sentence, I always have a bottle of tincture to help take the edge off.
Thank you for that, Professor Pat. It is always educational. Now, our next guest is also making her first appearance on the show, and what's especially fun about her coming onto the couch is that she's a friend of mine as well as a colleague. So, it is my pleasure to welcome Xiang Han to the Cannabist Show.
Hey,
how's it going?
How are you?
Going great.
Wonderful.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great today. Thank you so much for having me. This
I've
is
missed
fun.
you. I haven't seen you in like 2 weeks.
I know. You've been gallivanting around California.
I swear there was a lot of work in there.
It was with your bosses and coworkers, of course.
Yeah, I was with the GM. I was with producer Vince. I gave a couple talks, and then I went swimming in the beach in the ocean one day. Yeah. Oh my God, the Russian River is lovely.
Oh my gosh, I haven't been there yet.
You got to get up there.
I will.
So, switching from wine to cannabis, Xiang,
Yes.
where are you at on the indica sativa spectrum? I've never asked you this question.
I know.
So excited to see what you say.
I lean more towards indica, and then I also use CBD cream on my hands and also CBD oil on my hands. As you know, I do a lot of climbing and a lot of, skiing and outdoorsy things. And so, as the years have gone by, I don't recover as quickly as I do now. So the indica really just relaxes me at the end of the day, and then the CBD creams really help my hands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The topicals conversation,
Yes.
and you know that I'm fascinated by it, especially because it's such a, you know, it's such a new thing. There's more that we don't know about marijuana than what we do, and throw topicals into the mix, and it's like, oh, so this is going to help arthritis or whatever.
Absolutely.
But then you start to hear from patients, and it's like, no, it does help with my arthritis. It does. So can you explain, like, how's that feeling? Because you are extremely active and outdoorsy. Is it aches and pains and it just soothes those? What is it for you?
It does. And so, you know, a lot of times, especially when you're climbing, you're really crimping down on either small holds, you know, you're really, you know, using your forearms and really all parts of your body. But especially with the topicals, it kind of just eases those joints and those muscles, kind of what Jonathan said about, you know, football. You know, especially when you're using your full body, you're using a lot of muscles. You know, I need something that'll really relax them and to kind of ease, you know, the pain. And it really does work for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
also,
absolutely.
You were so cool. I love following you on Instagram because it's like, what did I do this weekend? I went to a rock show, went to a barbecue, and meanwhile, you're posting these like landscape photos of, you know, St. Mary's Glacier or something, and I'm always just like, wow, I bet she got up really early on Saturday to do that.
The alpine starts of 3 a.m. are killer. I don't suggest those, but I mean, it's beautiful to be able to experience the sunrise, or especially when you're on top of a mountain. It's definitely an otherworldly experience for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so glad to have you here, and also talk about what you do, because it's an important part of what we do here.
Right.
You are in the advertising business. A long road led you here, an interesting career, but now you're here, and for good reason. There are plenty of restrictions surrounding cannabis advertising.
Absolutely.
We need to be aware and responsible with how we advertise any intoxicant, right? So, but businesses can advertise on the Cannabist and other publications and other sites, but can you talk about why those businesses in and also around the industry can't advertise on Facebook or Google, but can advertise on the Cannabist, for example?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, what's really great about the Cannabist, it truly is kind of a safe area for businesses to get their message out and really have that B2B or that B2C message. You know, from a state perspective here, you know, dispensaries, for example, can only advertise within Colorado state lines because, you know, with Nebraska and Kansas and Utah and all the surrounding states, they're not in a legal market. And so dispensaries have to be very well aware of that. Another rule they have to adhere to is the 70-30 rule, so that no more than 30% of your audience can be 18 or below. So those are the two main things, and that's a pretty simplistic rule, right?
Sure.
But in terms of Facebook and Google, that's when we get really interesting there, because you know, even though Colorado or other legal states, you know, it's recreational, it's 21 plus, well, Facebook and Google, they look at it from a federally illegal standpoint. But it's very nuanced because, you know, even for us at the Cannabist, we weren't verified on Facebook until a couple weeks ago.
No doubt. Thanks. After 3 years.
Right. You can thank, you know, Brad, our GM, for that one. And you know, it's very nuanced because sometimes sponsored content from different dispensaries and from some of our clients have gone through. So it's very, very hit or miss, and you have to be very careful about that. And you have to be very careful about what you post and how you post. So it's a wide range.
And they only have limited opportunities, which is so interesting. I know I had a lot of conversations out in California over the last couple of weeks about people who are just so frustrated, whether they're running a ballot initiative or want to post politically and boost that post, or they have a weed business and they're growing up in Mendocino County.
Yeah.
You know, they're just frustrated and they're kind of at a loss. So moving on, if a business is in, let's say, Colorado, maybe California, Texas even.
Yeah.
If they want to spread their message on the Cannabist, what are the different ways they can do that here? And I only ask this, I know it seems cheesy and a little bit self-serving, but really, this very platform we're getting ready to start monetizing. This is our 83rd show. Never a single ad, people.
Right.
And we love you guys, and we are going to bring in some good sponsors and advertisers. So anyway, what are the other, what are the various ways that people can be heard?
Absolutely, and you know, number one is you can sponsor the show and also the podcast.
Right.
But you know, there's a lot of really great geo and demo targeting that we can do on the Cannabist, but not, you know, just impressions, but there's also the newsletter. You know, the stats that I saw this morning, we have 17,300, you know, active newsletter subscribers, and there's an opportunity, you know, to be a part of that. Definitely sponsored content is always a great play, just because you can talk to topics that you're really interested about as a company and sponsor that content. Video is a huge thing, because as we all know, video is starting to become, you know, a huge space in media and in marketing. And you know, being able to tell your story is a lot easier in a 15 to 30 second video as opposed to a 300 by 250 ad unit. Another thing is our events. We have our awards event coming up in November.
Oh man, the Cannabist Awards. I know. Do we have, you have the date off the top of your head?
November,
is it November
16th. You know, we're having it during the Marijuana Business Conference, and you know, and that's a really great way to get involved with us too. You know, being a sponsor and being there, because as you know, like, we host some great kick-ass events.
We do throw some pretty good parties.
Yes, yes.
And including the 420 Bash, which we'll probably do again next April.
Right, absolutely. And you know, depending on what happens in November, you know, we'll be celebrating as well. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities there, especially to be a part of the Cannabist.
Well, I'm excited, as Vince and I have poured our blood and sweat into the show for 83 episodes now to, you know, start bringing in the right kind of sponsors to the show to be a part of this community. And you know, we've talked a little bit about what that community has looked like and how it's grown, but I want to hear what you and your team have learned from, you know, there's various softwares out there. You mentioned geo-targeting. We have Google Analytics, and every time I go on there, I'm fascinated. In fact, 2 months ago, Texas surpassed Colorado as our second most read market, and so now it's California, Texas, Colorado, New York, and I think that brings some powerful data with it. So what have you learned about these various readerships, and also how could that benefit a business in Texas or California?
Absolutely. So with those three big states, you know, California, based on just population alone, you know, that makes sense in terms of our audience, and especially with, you know, them being on the ballot in November. Definitely seeing a huge, you know, upsurge of audience there. They've always been, you know, pretty high up there. In terms of Texas and Colorado, with Texas, you know, being number 2, and actually Colorado, they overtook Texas again, but when Texas was number 2, no, numbers are always changing. You know, really it's that investor money. You know, Texas has always been a very conservative, oil-driven state, but with cannabis, they're also seeing, you know, a lot of potential there for investing. I actually talked with an individual who owns an edibles company out in California, and he said that he was approached by an investor to buy out his company. They see a lot of potential in that market. And, you know, with Colorado especially, you know, we've always been on the forefront, and a lot of individuals, you know, countries, other states mimic us. And so, you know, for Colorado versus California and what people are reading, California, it seems to be more culture and resources, and Texas and Colorado, it's more news and culture.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's the breakdown.
And these are kind of, you know, if you look at the nav bar on the Cannabist, it's news, it's culture, resources, food, reviews. So, yeah, I don't know, I eat that stuff up, especially since we're just kind of here producing content and working with staffers, freelancers, and videographers, and plus you guys. It's always fun to see that. And I remember the moment earlier this year when we all realized that suddenly California was our #1 marketplace, and it was like, whoa, that's thrilling. That's exactly what we've been going for. We always wanted to be covering cannabis internationally, and this has increasingly become an international conversation, as you mentioned, and as we heard earlier in Alicia's quick hit, that people really are learning from Colorado. They are coming here to talk to the regulators, talk to the businesses, to go into a shop, go into a cultivation. It's been fascinating. I want to bring Jonathan back into this conversation because I know we've all read this story and saw the report when it came out earlier this month. The ACLU and the Human Rights Watch issued this report saying that drug possession lands someone in handcuffs every 25 seconds in the U.S., which is a pretty alarming statistic when you think about it. The report also said that pot arrests outnumber those for violent crimes in America. Jonathan, you mentioned violent crimes are going down, at least some of them. Still, those impacted are still disproportionately communities of color and the poor. We were told legalization would change this. So now that we have 25 medical states, 4 rec states, and another 9 voting on various legalization initiatives next month, why are we still seeing this concerning trend? Jonathan, I want to start with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the question. I think a lot of it goes back to what we were speaking on earlier, which is just the implicit biases. I mean, right now, you would also see a disproportionate number of people of color get shot at a routine traffic stop, as are also being arrested for drug uses.
As has been in the news so much lately in the last couple of years.
Exactly, and that really comes down to the fact that the laws are intended to be applied evenly to everybody. They're written that way. When legislators do their job, that's what they envision. And then you have to put real people in the process of enforcing them. And that's where this becomes more a conversation about education than enforcement in a lot of ways, I think. And that's, again, another one of the big hurdles that we have is while we're trying to monetize so quickly, because this industry is right in front of us, we also have to remember that if we want to shape it truly in our own image or in the image that we want to see, we have to educate while we're doing that. Otherwise, we're going to end up with an empty shell of a really functional marketplace, I think. Empty of the sort of the values that we want to see brought forward from the black market to the gray into the light.
And that's a lot of what my clients say too, is the education portion is huge, because I'll speak to individuals in other states about their own marketing, about their own marijuana marketing, and they may be medical or even recreational, and sometimes not everybody knows all the rules, and so the education portion is huge.
And so do we feel that at least that front line of law enforcement isn't educated in the way they need to be, especially for a modern world that is so clearly skewed in the wrong way, as we keep seeing with these body camera footage and iPhone footage of African American men being gunned down for no reason? How do we educate law enforcement better in this kind of space? I know it's a tough one.
I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, like how do you do right? And I don't know that there's an answer other than you have to have the carrot and the stick. You can't have all stick, which might be the enforcement side of things. Same with the police. You can't just punish bad cops all the time and not also reward or recognize what the good police officers are doing.
Sure.
Because just like we have to do that with our own community, we have to self-police our own community of folks and weed out the bad actors and support the ones who are doing good business. I think the same goes for law enforcement, and it also starts with self-accountability. Like, we can't make them, period. We can't make them stop shooting people of color. They have to want to, or they have to understand what's going on, and that requires something that, we can't sit on the outside and say this is the answer, and we can't legislate it. It has to happen through conversations like this over and over and over again. And this election cycle isn't necessarily helping, but it's not helping us cut through, but it's certainly bringing a lot to light. We're having more of these conversations, I think.
Bringing a lot to light. My family has a very rich tradition in law enforcement. I know lots of friends who have uncles and grandpas and all that kind of stuff as well. And we couldn't help but be kids growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, looking at the older generations and just wondering where they came up with these anachronistic, outdated ideas of race. And I guess I just hope that with future generations that there's a more enlightened front with every day, with every passing day, and every retirement and newly inducted member of a police force that is more colorblind and just more focused on the work they need to be doing. But you guys, it is time, now that we've had this very serious conversation, including about my family, it is time for the pot quiz. How this works is we are going to start with you, Jonathan.
Right.
If you get the answer wrong, Xiang can steal the points and vice versa.
Okay.
4 questions, 2 apiece. Jonathan, are you ready?
What are we playing for?
Bragging rights.
Fame?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll send you a mug when. Hey, Vince,
I was eyeing those mugs.
They're en route. I am tracking that package as we speak. They'll be here just in time for no one to get one this week.
Oh man.
All right.
Yeah. We will get your address and we'll send you a mug regardless. So
I'm
yeah,
not a novice, so let's go.
It's all bragging rights. I saw a number of people in California who were like, dude, you have to get me back on the show. I need to defend my honor. I swear I'm not, I know more than that. It was just a busy week and I wasn't reading the news, but.
Uh-oh, all right, now I'm really thinking.
Okay. This is all cannabis current events. Jonathan, we're starting with you. Name the auto parts retailer that recently donated $1 million to the campaign opposing recreational legalization in Arizona.
I want to say, hold on. I want to say Pep Boys.
Pep Boys. That is a good guess. And yeah, but it's wrong.
Yeah.
But it's wrong. Xiang for the steal.
It is Napa Auto Parts.
It is not.
No!
Oh, no.
I thought it was.
It is Discount Tire
No!
Company.
Oh, okay, all right.
Who is based in Phoenix.
Yeah, okay. I did recall hearing that.
Yeah, and oddly, like a lot of people were just wondering why, and they didn't really make release a statement, do any press.
Strikes me kind of like the Hobby Lobby thing, you know, where they're just finding a way to leverage their, you know, dollars.
Yeah, or their
voice.
Yeah, I wonder if it is a concern of like religion or something. But nobody gets the point. Xiang, you're up next.
All right.
The wife of a state trooper killed by a driver who allegedly smoked marijuana before the crash is asking voters in what state to vote against the state's recreational cannabis initiative next month. So it's one of 5 states.
Is it Nevada?
It is not. But Nevada is one of the 5
Yes.
states, so good call. Jonathan for the steal.
That would strike me as an Arizona story.
Oh man, we're walking around these answers. Very close. But we're on the East Coast here, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was a relatively high-profile case, and you know, with the way toxicology works, we still don't quite know exactly what was going on with the driver, but hopefully we'll find out, and hopefully somebody will report that. Jonathan,
all right.
Next up. A former Philadelphia mayoral candidate was recently caught and cited for having marijuana in what kind of building where it is prohibited?
I would say a school or a public building.
A school. We'll have to go with the first one.
Okay.
A school. No. Okay. Xiang, I think you gave yourself like a little, oh, I know this one.
It was an airport.
It was an
and
airport.
it was Sam Katz.
That was the gentleman?
Yes.
Oh, wow. How do you know the name?
I read that one.
Oh, okay. Well, good for you. I just read it too, but I didn't know the name. Apparently, he'd run for mayor of Philadelphia 3 times in the 90s or something.
Right, and they found like a little bag in his luggage.
Yeah, and he's like, well, I haven't gotten high in years, and I thought it would be fun. I'm going to Florida for a beach vacation, and yeah, it wasn't my smartest decision. But I think it was a $25 fine.
Yeah,
oh, good.
That's it.
So.
Yeah.
Props, Pennsylvania. To be exact, Philadelphia International Airport, but you do get the point. And Xiang, last question to you. In November, voters in Denver will have their say on a social cannabis use measure that would allow pot consumption inside certain businesses, bars, restaurants, art galleries, with the approval of a neighborhood group. So, how did the Denver Post editorial board come down on the initiative? Did they, A, vote yes so we can try this? B, did they say vote no because it's the wrong measure, the wrong wording? C, they haven't endorsed one side or the other.
They said yes and try it.
Damn, Xiang came prepared, brought her game. Well done, well done. Yeah, formidable opponent. Granted, she does work for the Cannabist, but still.
Hey, yeah, absolutely.
I want to thank my guests, Jonathan Teeters and Xiang Han, But most importantly, thank you to all of you for watching, listening. Please hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you're listening to. And also, hey, maybe send this link to a friend or two who you think might dig it. I am Ricardo Vaca, joined by producers Vince and Don and the rest of the crew. Have a great day, and we will see you next week.
I'm allowed to lose, I choose to win, I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end. I say it again, ain't afraid to get in, I be going for the jackpot with ace in my hand, I'm raw.